My mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "You brought this on yourself, Sophie. Don't expect a single dime of help from us." My own brother nodded in agreement, whispering that my sheer carelessness had finally caught up to me. They left me standing in the freezing rain with nothing but the clothes on my back, completely turning their backs on me. But before you judge my life, I'm glad to have you here. So I can see how far my story has reached. Because the ashes were still warm when the lead fire investigator pulled me aside, holding a charred piece of evidence in his gloved hand. What he revealed next didn't just break my heart, it exposed a dark betrayal that changed everything. My name is Sophie, and at 33 years old, I watched everything I owned turn into thick black smoke and ash. The flashing red lights of the fire trucks cast eerie shadows over the skeleton of what used to be my beautiful home. Shaking from both the freezing night air and sheer shock, I clutched my phone with trembling fingers and dialed my mother. I expected comfort, a gasp of horror, or a desperate voice asking if I was okay. Instead, the line connected, and the silence on the other end felt heavier than the smoke in my lungs. When I finally choked out that the house had burned down, there was no sympathy. My mother sighed heavily, her voice sharp and dripping with immediate disgust. "You brought this on yourself, Sophie," she snapped. "I always knew your sheer carelessness would catch up to you. Did you leave the stove on again? Or did you neglect the old wiring like we warned you?" Before I could even defend myself, my brother Julian chimed in from the background, his tone smug and completely devoid of warmth. "Don't expect a single dime of help from us to fix your constant mistakes," he muttered. They didn't ask if I had shoes on my feet or a place to sleep. Within a matter of seconds, my own flesh and blood had put a label on me. Irresponsible, guilty, and entirely on my own. They hung up, leaving me standing in the freezing, smoldering ruins. To understand why my family turned on me so quickly while the embers were still hot, you have to understand where that house came from. 2 years ago, my late grandmother passed away and left the property entirely to me. It was a beautiful, spacious suburban home, and she gave it to me because I had spent 5 long years acting as her primary caretaker while everyone else ignored her calls. My brother Julian was absolutely consumed by rage. He and my parents had spent months dropping hints about how they deserved to liquidate the asset, and they made every family dinner an absolute nightmare with their passive-aggressive remarks. Julian constantly muttered that I had somehow manipulated our grandmother and that I didn't deserve a single square foot of that land. Now, standing in the ruins of that very house, I had nowhere else to turn. With my clothes smelling of smoke and my savings tied up in the property, I swallowed my pride and drove straight to my parents' house. I knocked on the door, merely asking if I could sleep in their vacant spare room for just 2 weeks until the emergency insurance paperwork cleared. My mother looked at me through a crack in the door, her expression frozen in ice, while Julian stood right behind her with his arms crossed. "We won't enable your failures, Sophie," my mother said coldly. "Living here would just be a reward for your irresponsibility." And with that, they slammed the door. With no family support and nowhere else to go, I hit absolute rock bottom. I ended up moving into a cheap, rundown motel on the edge of town, surviving entirely on basic emergency insurance vouchers that barely covered a hot meal. The room smelled of stale cigarettes, and the walls were paper thin, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional betrayal that followed. Within days, I discovered that my family was actively launching a vicious smear campaign against me. Extended relatives stopped answering my texts, and an aunt finally revealed why. My parents and Julian were telling everyone that I had burned down the house on purpose to scam the insurance company for quick cash. They completely ruined my reputation, painting me as a desperate criminal. But as I sat on the edge of that squeaky motel bed, the overwhelming numbness finally began to clear, replaced by a cold, sharp sense of clarity. I stopped crying and started thinking about the night of the fire. Something wasn't adding up. I distinctly remembered a conversation on the sidewalk while the roof was collapsing. A faulty crockpot in the kitchen must have started it. But the fire department hadn't even stepped inside to look for an origin point yet. How could he possibly know the fire started in the kitchen unless he had inside information? A dark, terrifying suspicion began to take root in my mind. The breakthrough happened exactly 6 days after the fire, when my phone rang. It was Agent Marcus, the lead fire investigator assigned to my case. His voice carried a formal, heavy seriousness that immediately made my heart race. He asked me to meet him back at the property right away for an official interview. When I arrived, the charred ruins looked even more depressing in the bleak morning light. Agent Marcus was waiting by the yellow police tape, holding a thick clipboard. He didn't make any polite small talk. Instead, he looked directly at me and confirmed my absolute worst fear. The fire was definitely not an accident. He explained that the team had completely ruled out electrical failures or kitchen appliances. Instead, their specialized equipment had detected undeniable traces of a highly concentrated, commercial-grade accelerant poured directly beneath the back patio door. Someone had intentionally set my house ablaze. Agent Marcus then leaned in closer. His sharp eyes locked onto mine as he asked the ultimate, high-retention question that made my entire body go numb. "Sophie, we found something specific at the scene. Do you know exactly who had physical access to your property last week? Because whoever did it had a key, and we need to know who stood to gain the most if this entire house vanished." The image of Julian's smug face instantly flashed across my mind, and a terrifying wave of certainty washed over me. As Agent Marcus waited for my response, a sudden realization hit me like a physical blow. I didn't just have a suspicion, I had a way to prove it. 2 months prior, after noticing some missing tools from my shed, I had installed a battery-powered security camera disguised as a small birdhouse. It was mounted high on an oak tree, facing the back driveway and the patio door where the accelerant had been poured. Because it ran on a cellular network, it bypassed the home's Wi-Fi and uploaded everything directly to a secure cloud server. My hands shook violently as I pulled out my phone, logged into the application, and handed the screen to the investigator. Together, standing in the cold air, we began reviewing the motion-activated footage from the night of the disaster. At exactly 2 o'clock in the morning, a figure materialized from the shadows of the woods, stepping cautiously into the frame. The person was carrying a heavy plastic gas can and, chillingly, used a physical key to unlock my back gate. They walked right up to the patio door and began systematically dousing the wood. But then, the criminal made a fatal mistake. Just before striking a match, they paused to look up, directly into the camera lens, and pulled down their hood to wipe sweat from their forehead. The night vision footage was crystal clear, capturing every single facial feature in high definition. It wasn't a stranger. It was my brother Julian, and parked just down the street in the background, clearly visible under the street lamp, was my mother's distinct silver sedan. The arson report, paired with this undeniable digital evidence, exposed the truth. My family hadn't just abandoned me. They had actively tried to incinerate my entire life. Instead of rushing to confront them in a fit of blind rage, I took a deep breath and worked directly with Agent Marcus to set the ultimate trap. I needed them to walk right into their own undoing. The very next day, I called my mother, forcing my voice to sound completely broken, defeated, and desperate. I told her that the motel was driving me insane and that I was finally ready to accept their advice. I claimed that I wanted to wash my hands of the property entirely and sign over all my remaining land rights to Julian for a mere fraction of its actual value. The greed was instantaneous. Within seconds, her cold tone vanished, replaced by a smooth, predatory excitement. They eagerly agreed to meet me at my motel room that evening to finalize the paperwork. When the knock came, my parents and Julian walked in wearing triumphant smiles, fully believing they had successfully broken me. Julian even brought a clipboard with the quitclaim deed, looking down his nose at me. But the moment they sat down at the small laminate table, the smile died on his face. I didn't reach for his pen. Instead, I calmly reached under the bed and pulled out the official arson report, along with high-resolution, color prints of the security footage frames showing his face and my mother's car. I slammed them flat onto the table. The color completely drained from Julian's face, and my mother gasped, instantly clutching her chest. I looked them dead in the eye and whispered that the police were already standing right outside the door. Their arrogance vanished, instantly replaced by frantic, trembling pleas for family mercy. The police moved in immediately, and no amount of crying or begging could save them from the consequences of their actions. Julian was arrested right there in the motel room, subsequently facing severe felony charges for arson and insurance fraud. My parents were deeply implicated as accomplices for providing the transportation and helping plan the crime, which completely destroyed their financial standing and social reputation. They had tried to ruin me out of pure, unadulterated greed, but in the end, they only succeeded in destroying themselves. With the official arson report clearing my name entirely, the insurance company quickly processed my claim, issuing a full payout for the value of the house and all my destroyed belongings. I chose not to rebuild on that toxic soil. Instead, I sold the empty plot of land to a developer, severed all ties with my biological family, and moved halfway across the country to start completely fresh. I bought a beautiful new home where nobody knows my past, fully vindicated and finally at peace. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if your own flesh and blood tried to destroy your life for greed? Would you have the strength to turn them into favorites, and they will definitely surprise you?